I know it's been a short coffee break, but I promise you, it will be fun when we get back, because what we start now is what we call a Körber debate. Körber debates resemble classic Oxford-Cambridge-style debates, but we adjusted the rules a little bit. That's why they're called Körber debates. Stefan Braun will explain more of the exact substance later. We host those kinds of Körber debates on a regular basis in our headquarters in Hamburg in cooperation with Süddeutsche Zeitung. And these events are proof of the fact that foreign policy discussions are increasingly interesting for the general public, because they usually draw more than 200 people for an evening event on a Tuesday night on a regular basis. So this is a very good format to engage people from all fields of life and all walks of life. Today, the opponents will debate the question, will the nuclear deal make the Middle East more unstable in the long run? This question only serves as the background for the wider question of regional order in the Middle East region. For this debate, I'm delighted to welcome on the pro side, Raghida Dergham, and on the contra side, Omid Nouripour. The debate will be aptly moderated by Stefan Braun of the Berlin office of Süddeutsche Zeitung. Stefan Braun will make sure that the debate stays civil and respectful, and that the opponents do not exceed the time that is allotted to them. And he will ask you for your vote in just a minute. So please join me in welcoming Raghida Dergham, Omid Nouripour, and Stefan Braun on stage.
Also for me, thank you very much. A warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us for this debate. Most of you will know the framework for the next hour. Nevertheless, I will explain it a little bit. A very special framework. It's a competition. It's a competition between two experts discussing and trying to win your support, the support of the audience. We are going to take two votes, one at the beginning and one at the end of the discussion. The goal is to check whether the discussion makes a difference for you. Who had the better arguments? Who was more convincing? Our topic for the next hour is the nuclear treaty with Iran. I'm very happy to introduce to you two very interesting, very experienced, very outspoken participants. On my right side, Raghida Dergham. She's the founder and executive chairman of the Beirut Institute, an independent think tank for the Arab region. In 2011, and I've just learned in 2015 again, she was named one of the most influential Arab women. She's a senior correspondent for the London-based Arab daily Al Hayat and contributes regularly to international papers and medias. Mrs. Dergham lives in New York. Thank you very much for being with us today. On my left side, Omid Nouripour. Mr. Nouripour is a member of the Green Party. He's a member of the German parliament with a long experience in Iran, the Middle East, and international relations. Thank you, too. When we started to think about this one-hour debate, we decided to choose the following question. Is the deal with Iran the opening of Pandora's box? Will he make the Middle East more unstable? Or is the deal, as most governments from Washington to Moscow, from Tehran to Berlin claim, is this nuclear treaty the start in a better world, making the region more secure and more peaceful? Now, 3 weeks after the US election, we all know that we also can ask, would it be good or bad for peace and security in the Middle East if Donald Trump does what he promised in his campaign, that he would cancel and stop the deal? In the 60 minutes, we will discuss all this. Now we should start with the first vote, your vote, the vote of the audience. After that, the two will give their first statements, 5 minutes each. Then I will add on one question to Mrs. Dergham, one to Mr. Nouripour, and then the audience will be in. Now, please, the first vote. Just take the machine, please. The timetable is tight. If you think the deal is the opening of Pandora's box, please press button 1. If you think the deal brings more security, please press button 2. Here on the right side, you can see that.
80 to 20.
Wow. Okay, 20 to 80. That is an interesting area. Let's start the discussion. Raghida, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, but it is quite a wonderful challenge that I have to somehow deal with 80-20 opening statement, but let me try. I count on your open mind, and I hope that you will benefit at least from thinking about it, even if you don't change your mind. The nuclear deal with Iran was never exclusively confined to Iran's nuclear ambitions. By agreeing to the Islamic Republic of Iran's 3 preconditions, the US, Russia, China, the UK, France, and Germany knew very well they were deliberately turning a blind eye to Tehran's designs of regional expansion and hegemony. They were well aware that this would fuel the sectarian Sunni-Shiite divide and produce more radical militants from both camps. If they were not aware of that, they should have. I argue that this was a historic mistake that will come back to haunt Europe, not only the Middle East. It already began to manifest itself through the refugee crisis and through the migration of terrorism to Europe and beyond. The 3 preconditions of Iran were as follows. 1, recognizing Iran's right to nuclear capability. By agreeing to a mere 10-year freeze on Iran's nuclear program rather than adhering to the NPT, the 3+3 violated the NPT and dismantled its core principles. The long-term consequences will eventually lead to a nuclear race in the region. Make no mistake about that. Secondly, the second condition was recognizing the legitimacy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. By agreeing to this precondition, the 3+3 lent international legitimacy to a theocracy which was the first to introduce imposing religion on the state as a republic. You might point out that Saudi Arabia is a kingdom, and it is the custodian of the 2 holy places, but this is not a republic. The bet on the rise of moderates in Iran has not won. In fact, the hardline mullahs and revolutionary guards continue their designs of exporting the Iranian revolution to Arab countries, playing the sectarian card. The moderates silently support their adventures in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon alike. This brings me to the 3rd precondition of Iran, which is recognizing Iran's regional leadership. By bowing to Tehran's utter rejection of any discussion of its regional adventures while negotiating the nuclear deal, the 3+3 agreed to look away and silently bless Iran's interventions in the internal affairs of Arab countries, again playing the Shiite card, exempting Tehran from accountability. The consequences are clear already. They are devastating for Syria, threatening to the territorial integrity of Iraq, paralyzing for Lebanon, and endangering to international naval navigation through Bab el-Mandeb in Yemen. Earlier on, Iran's military intervention in Syria was shrouded with secrecy and camouflaged by claims of extending a hand to Tehran's ally Bashar al-Assad through military advisors, they said. Nowadays, Iran boasts boldly that its men are fighting in Syria and bluntly imports Iranian-trained Shiite militias to Syria from Iraq and Afghanistan. Hezbollah, of course, is a different story. It showcases its military intervention in Syria proudly. Iran is today an essential military component of the axis with Russia and al-Assad regime. This axis is engaged in a civil war in Syria, no matter how much it claims it is fighting terrorists like ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, or their likes. This axis is, by the account of many Western countries, is committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing, particularly in Aleppo. The money from the nuclear deal enabled men like Qasem Soleimani to form and lead Shia militias openly in Arab battlelands. He is eliminating any challenge to Iran's export of its revolution to Arab lands. The model is the Revolutionary Guards. This week, the Shiite majority in the parliament voted to legitimize al-Hashd al-Shabi, which is the local paramilitary force of fighters, as a parallel power to the regular army, flaring sectarian divide and possibly the partition of Iraq. Iran announced its intention to expand its naval military might in the seas and strategic locations. This, according to one Iranian official, is more important than the nuclear deal. They're even speaking also about bases in Syria and Yemen. All this militancy expansions, sectarian wars, and interventions have been either enabled or empowered by the nuclear deal. Iranian leaders feel superior and are confident that the Western leaders will not confront them because of the nuclear deal has tied their hands, stripped them of the address to address their regional actions, and they were deliberately absolved of accountability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nouripour, it's yours.
This kind of debate is very tempting to a politician to start with. Please vote for me. No matter what I'm going to promise, Mexico will pay for it, so there is no risk in it. I agree with everything I've heard before, and there are huge risks connected to the deal we have. Iran is getting a lot of money. They're going to spend it for a lot of good things. They're going to invest into the civil infrastructure of the country. They will buy a lot of civil aircrafts they needed desperately after 40 years of sanctions. But yeah, definitely Iran going to get a lot of money for an aggressive regional policy too, and they are getting it, and they are spending it in now. Iran is playing a very bad role in Syria and in Lebanon and partly in Iraq. And this is not why I'm saying that the deal is making the region a safer place. The reason is no deal means no inspections. No inspection is the fastest track of Iran to getting the bomb. This is the whole formula, and I never got an answer to that sentence from those who are opposing the deal before. Iran having the A-bomb means that there are a couple of countries in the region who are going to try to get a bomb too, and this is definitely the worst thing could happen to the whole region, and this is a fire with another level of heat than the one we have it in these days. The question is how to cooperate with Iran, and there are a lot of things we are in need of cooperation with Iran. The answer I would give to that is there shouldn't be any illusions, and there is no need to think that there should be a gold rush or something. Iran couldn't be a strategic partner for the West in these days. But what we need in these days, I think, is something like an equidistance between the West and Iran, like we have it in the same way we have in the distance. We should have the distance to Saudi Arabia. I just mentioned Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. Let me mention Yemen, Bahrain, and Pakistan, where the Saudis are the bad guys. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure which country could be the best partner I can have. I would say none of them, but we are in need of cooperation because of a lot of issues in the region we cannot resolve with the countries. Giving legitimacy to Iran is something they do not need, and inviting them to the Syria talks is totally obvious because of the facts, because of the reality of the power now we have in Syria. At the end of the day, I just can repeat that we need an equidistance to Iran and to Saudi Arabia, but those people who are now in our cities and kidnapping our kids for jihadism and bringing them to Syria and Iraq are not paid by Iran, but are Salafis who are getting money from a lot of people in the Gulf. So I'm not talking about improving the relations to Iran. I'm talking about cooling down the relations with the other side of the Gulf, and we can play some role as a broker, which is believable to both sides of the country. At the end of the day, thank you very much. Vote for me, and yeah, I just, you know, if I have a choice between two bad alternatives, I take the alternative where there is no nuclear weapon, and there is no other way than to talk to Iran. I know that they're gonna cheat. They're gonna try to cheat. Everybody's saying that, but hey, we could win a lot of time we hadn't before. So this is why I would say that this, if I got the voting right, what the wise vote I saw here, 80 to 20. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mrs. Dergham, you want to react directly?
Yeah, I would like to say that it's fascinating that I respect your honesty, but you said that we know that they're going to cheat, but it's okay. I think this is a very dangerous statement.
They're trying to cheat.
They're trying to cheat, and then I know that is not a very comforting notion to say that, yes, we gave a nuclear deal for 10 years, and yeah, well, they're going to try to cheat, and that's fine. That's going to bring stability to the region. I think that is quite scary, and I think that is a very dangerous precedent. I repeat, it's not only about the potential of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon, it is also the potential of encouraging others in the region to say, me too, why not I?
Then the other question was mainly what Mr. Nouripour said. Without any agreement, there would be just going on with the scientists, no controls. Is this not a very good argument against your position?
No, because of course I was, let's all remember when it was the issue of Iraq, we were told, although later it was admitted there was no prohibited weapons in Iraq, we were told, yes, we had to pursue the scientists. And in fact, the scientists of Iraq were pursued, where they were locked up, and there were probably other things were done to them. I think it is not enough to justify breaking the NPT system by saying, you know what, it could have happened, we could have had a war. I think there should have been a much firmer deal with Iran. I am for absolutely making sure that there is no proliferation, whether it is by Iranians or Arabs, and I worry very much that this nuclear deal, because it is only about freezing for 10 years, no more, and with the circumstances that we're under, the possible cheating and the possible race, I am very worried that this has opened potentially, God forbid, potentially a nuclear Pandora's box.
Okay. Mr. Nouripour, do you see in any case the chance that there will be really a good sense for the next months or years, the result of the agreement? At the moment, Tehran is trying to get everything to expand its influence. That makes the Arab world more angry, more anxious. So what is the answer for that the Iranian regime is trying to get a very, very big plus for all of that?
You know, I didn't say that Iran is cheating, I said that they're trying. We had Mr. Amano here a couple of weeks ago, and he told us that these are the most severe inspections they ever had. They got a lot of money for this, and they have something like insight of that, what's going on, and he said that he cannot say that Iran, at the end of the day, cheated yet. Yes. You do not want them to cheat. You have to go on with inspections. You'd say, yo, we do not need that deal. We go for another one. That means that you stop the inspections. So there is no need for the cheat anymore. Then they're gonna run the centrifuge the way they want to do it. And I would say this is the biggest encouragement to the countries in the region to go for a nuclear bomb. You want them to. You want these countries who are afraid. I see that and I know that. You don't want them to go for a nuclear bomb. You just have to contain what's going on in Iran. And this is what the deal is about. No deal means no containment, means the biggest encouragement you can have for the whole region, for the Saudis, for Egypt, for Turkey, to try to get a bomb. And this is the worst thing. I'm just repeating that. I do not see how to get a much firmer deal with the scene we have now in Earth. You just described the situation in Syria. You need the Russians to get back to the table and say, okay, now we're going to be really harsh to the Iranians. Do you see this? I do not see that. So I would say we got something. This was a diplomatic success after 13 years of negotiations. There is no insurance, no scenario that we could get a better deal. So we should keep the one we have.
May I make
yes,
a comment?
Of course.
Look,
we do have time.
Yes, I do not call to dismantle the deal with Iran now. I do not support anybody who is encouraging Donald Trump to say, tear it up. I did not say that, and I will not support that. I believe in, now that we are here, well, first of all, I address the consequences on the regional level, the problems with the Iranian nuclear deal on the regional level. And I went through the consequences and what it led to because of the empowerment of Iran. Now, having said that, I want to go back to the nuclear part, and I think what Mr. Trump will do as president, when he's president, I think probably they will try to negotiate starting now what would it look like 10 years down the road. And I think that's very wise, instead of just leaving it to the inspectors, to the international inspectors. And I think it's time to reintroduce to the table the element of Iran's ambitions and adventures regionally. It was wrong to just be quiet and separate the regional ambitions from the nuclear deal. It is time to address that now. It is time to reintroduce that so that the Western countries do not look like they are absolving Iran from accountability and giving Iranian leaders, particularly the Revolutionary Guards, the visa and the equipment and the money to go and wreak havoc in Arab lands. I think this is dangerous because it will produce more radicalism instead of cultivating what we need. We need moderates. We don't need more radicals. It is important to pay attention that the Sunni-Shia divide, and I just want to come clean on that. I'm neither Sunni nor Shia, so for those who might be trying to guess, I am neither. I'm a secularist. But the point is that it is so important that we need to reintroduce the issue of regional ambitions so that we do not make this mistake once again. It will cost us twice as much.
I totally agree with that. By the way, I'm usually Shia, but in these days I'm a Sunni and Shia. I totally agree with that, what you said. This is what I said, that we need equidistance between the West on one side and then Iran and Saudi Arabia at the other side. So we can't, you want to talk brief and you want to talk frank to the Iranians. You talk about Aleppo, they start with Sana'a, and they have a point on that. The situation in Sana'a is very bad. The situation in Aleppo is even worse. I know that. But you want to play a broker role there, you have to have an equidistance between the West and then Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Once,
okay.
short one.
Look, I think the comparison between Yemen and Iran and Syria is really not correct because of what intervention came at what time, and after all, this situation in Yemen was due to the threats to the national security of Saudi Arabia at its own borders. It was not a national threat to Iran at its borders, nor to Russia. Having said that, any excesses, any bombing of civilians, whether it is by the Arab coalition in Sana'a or by the Russian coalition in Syria, is to be condemned. Targeting civilians, I'm against.
I think the discussion is quite like we want to have it, but I have to turn to the audience, and I now want to ask you whether you have questions to both of them. I have only 2 requests. Just introduce yourself shortly, and no new statement, please. Questions, that would be fine. Thank you very much. The gentleman here. You have just 1 minute, that's regular.
More than that. Thank you very much. I'm coming from Iran Foreign Ministry. The nuclear deal had 2 very important strategic effects, one regionally and the other globally. Regionally, what it did, it removed a fabricated common strategic threat between Saudi Arabia and the United States. And this is a big threat for Saudi Arabia. Hence, they are not against Iranian nuclear activity in the first place. If we ship all we have on the ground, still Saudis will complain that this is not enough. So the consequence is that the world understood the real nature of the real threat to international security first, that is terrorism of global reach. Second, the world easily now can talk about the source of terrorism financially, ideologically, and logistically. This really hurts Saudi Arabia. The second point...
Sorry, the minute is over. Sorry. It's irregular. You have just 1 minute for the question. You can...
From Iran,
yeah, okay.
Iran has not represented anybody here.
Okay.
So please, the second point, the nuclear deal diffused a very unnecessary war, which nobody needed, due to a fabricated crisis. And that's very, very important. Those people who talk about, suspicion and doing something against nuclear deal, they're really talking about, again, going back to the war language, assuming and taking as a face value some of the rhetoric coming from Trump. It means a new, a new tribal nationalism coming in Washington. In that context...
Gentlemen, sorry.
In that context...
Just a question to her or to him.
No, it's me as an Iranian,
yes.
as someone...
Yes, I know.
The whole thing is talking about Iran. So
okay.
please.
So can I address?
So this is really for something like that. One last point, very important last point. If that is their new atmosphere, and the people are trying to take us back to the war language, it is naive to think economic sanction is a substitute for the war. Economic sanction would be a pretext for the war. Talking about Iran, which is a force of stabilization in Iraq, Afghanistan, yes. Syria, everywhere, talking
Please.
about as a middle...
Gentlemen, yes, we know, but we have to be in the regulars. Thank you very much. You want to answer, please?
Yeah, sure. I just would like to say that none of what the gentleman said justifies what Iran is doing by intervening militarily in Arab lands. There is, I'm sorry, let me just finish.
No, please.
I'm sorry, it's not that, there was no such request beforehand, and this pretext of request is a pretext and nothing else. There is no reason why Iran should be forming militias to be counterpart to armies in Arab lands. You are exporting the revolution along the line of the Basij example, the way that you have wanted your revolution, keep it to yourself. You have no need to bring it to us. We have been living, Shiites and Sunnis, quite well. We did not need the parallel militias in order to divide us further and to create more radicalism. The militias are as guilty as terrorists when they are killing civilians, whether they are Shiites or Sunnis. It's not only Sunni terrorism, there is Shiite terrorism as well. So let us make sure that the situation, no matter what you want to say, it does not give you the right, sir, to form militias, export them to Arab lands, and then have them run by your headquarters in Tehran.
Do you want to say
I like the rounds where there is no countdown clock anymore. Thank you. I do agree with that. What you just said on Syria. What I do not agree is the difference you just made between the situation in Syria and the situation in Yemen. Hadi invited the Saudis and then the GCC countries to come in. Definitely. What they are doing now is totally unproportional. They are destroying the whole civil infrastructure of the whole country. And the last thing is, talking about national interest, Iran is doing the same in Syria. So I wouldn't say that Iran does not have national interest in Syria, but Saudi Arabia has some in Yemen. Both of them have, but none of them are legitimate to do what they're doing there, and we should make that point. And the last one is, there is one huge problem in Tehran and in Riyadh. I see, if I've talked to the people there. There is a huge mutual paranoia, which leads to the fire both countries are setting to a lot of countries we had before. And the problem is, you talk to people in Tehran, they say, hey, the Saudi is going to fall in a couple of months because of the Shia uprising in the East province. And you talk to the people in Riyadh, they say, hey, the Iranian regime is going to fall in a couple of months because of the uprising of the young people in Tehran. This will not happen, but this thinking leads to the fact that nobody's looking for a modus vivendi. And this is why we have to find a way to play a broker role there, to find common interests of the two countries in the whole region.
Absolutely. Just one line of difference between Yemen and Syria. Yemen is a place where the borders are between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. That is important. The issue of borders in Yemen versus the lack of borders of Iran and Syria, that is the only difference. I agree with you otherwise.
The next question, the lady here, please.
Michaela Küfner, Deutsche Welle. Mr. Nouripour pretty much admitted that this is a containment effort, this Iran deal. Having just refreshed your mind about the wider ambitions of Iran in the region, what was your alternative? We haven't heard from you. What would have been the viable alternative to this Iran deal?
Yeah, shall I?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, the alternative would have been a better negotiated deal. That's number one. That would have been absolutely an alternative to a badly negotiated deal. The alternative would be not to agree to separate the nuclear file from everything else that Iran was doing in the region. That would have been a smart alternative. You don't strip yourself of all the tools to influence, and you can't justify, sort of like exempting Iran from capability for the wars that happened in other parts of that region, leading to more terrorism, leading to terrorism coming to Europe, to refugees. You can't just say that, we avoided one war, but we agree or we can't do anything about help and push to make others in the region that is not inside Iran. I think it would have been a very important conclusion to have a deal that would have not separated the regional ambitions from the nuclear negotiations. I think that would have been doable. But too bad. I'm sad that it was not done.
The next question here, the gentleman, please. Yeah.
The nuclear deal is unlikely to survive in the medium term if the regional tensions remain at the level they are. I mean, what do you think would be a realistic path to the de-escalation of tensions between Iran and Arab countries? What do you see as a potential role of Europeans, potential role of the US in facilitating such a de-escalation?
I have no idea what the US role is going to be for the next years. We are waiting for, the inauguration is nigh. I just can't repeat myself. I think the Europeans' role should be to play the honest broker there. That means not to have strategic partnerships, but to have pragmatic relations to both countries and try to find a way to cooperate on many different issues we have to cooperate on.
Yes, Jean-Marie, I think you're so right to say that the tensions in the region will eventually jeopardize the nuclear deal. And again, I want to add, I'm so afraid that the nuclear deal, in that sense, under such tensions, would lead to ambitions of countries in the region acquiring the nuclear capability, buy it, if you will, off somebody's shelf. I think the path to de-escalation is clearly, from my point of view, putting back the issue of Iran's behavior on the table. What Iran is doing, we could start with Syria. What Iran is doing in Syria and with Syria in an axis with Russia and Bashar al-Assad is something that should be discussed. Europe does not discuss that. The United States, they don't talk about it. What the United States should do in case Mr. Trump needs to do something about the nuclear deal, it is not to tear it apart, it is to really negotiate it correctly, renegotiate it, what would happen 10 years down the line, and introduce the regional ambitions squarely and clearly.
Raghida. Omid?
We discussed that all the time. I had a panel with Mr. Mousavian a couple of weeks ago. He started with the Europeans are not talking about Yemen. I had delivered 3 speeches on that in the German Bundestag, in the plenary session. We are trying to talk about Yemen, and we definitely talk about that's what's going on in Syria and the role Iran and Russia are playing there. The discussions we have in these days are which are the right pressure moments we can have. Are there sanctions or other measures we have to take? But we are talking about it all the time. This is the main topic.
When I say Syria, you say Yemen.
No. This is why we should get over that. Not about Yemen and not to blame each other, not to talk about this and that. Yeah. We are talking about Yemen and we are talking about Syria. This is the issue in the German Bundestag in the Foreign Committee.
It is very important to put the issue of formation of militias, exporting them to other countries on that table. It is very important to call war crimes war crimes. It is important to stop hiding behind our fingers and just being so afraid that whatever we say in Europe or the USA is going to lead to affecting negatively the nuclear deal. It's time.
Sure. This is why, my question to Iranian people I see is now there are 3 types of sanctions because of the nuclear program, because of the human rights situation there, and because of supporting armed groups. How do you want to try to get over the sanctions? And I never get an answer on that. Sure.
Next question. Herr Nils, please.
Thomas Nates with the ARD Radio. Both questions in 1 minute to one of the best informed UN correspondents I ever met. I was there for 5 years too. So, first of all, is this treaty not a chance to bring the whole world closer to a dream of the early 90s we had? That was a dream of a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. I mean, at least we have a treaty now. And the second question would be, even as a German, I may ask you, why should I be more afraid of the non-existing Iranian nuclear weapon rather than of the existing Israeli one?
Well, I think you should be afraid. I'll start with the last one. I think you should be afraid of both. The Israeli weapon, nuclear weapon, is a fact. Again, the world got used to just turning a blind eye on that. So I certainly am not going to say that because Israel has the weapon, it's going to be justified that Iran gets one and then the Arabs get two and then, you know, who knows, get three. I am against proliferation, and I think it's so important to go back to trying to once again tighten the screws of the NPT rather than say, oh, they've got it, I need it. And as far as the weapon, well, Middle East free zone, free of weapons of mass destruction, I think it's too late, unfortunately. I am saying, forgive me, but I am saying that this nuclear deal introduced the right of Iran eventually to have the nuclear power. And the 3/4 of the people here know that Iran tried to acquire the weapon, the weaponization of the nuclear capability. We know that, all of us. So then if we bought 10 years down the road only, is this going to be to make us feel safer in that region or to dream of that weapon-free zone in the Middle East? I wish. It's not going to happen.
I'm with her.
Thank you. So vote for me. He's with me.
Very good, very good. The gentleman there, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Stefan Safarian, coming from Armenia. Just a very brief comment. If the ground of our judgment and assessment on Iran's role is just Middle East and Syria, I think that it's not a good test for that because none of countries, neither regional nor extra-regional, might be proud of their role in that chaos. Americans would accuse Russia in negative role or politics, and Russians will accuse and are accusing Americans and Westerners in their engagement. Some others blame Turkey and so on. So I don't think that the issue is in Middle East and Iran's policy there. We saw two Irans, one under sanction. And obviously, we were worried of that Iran.
Please, next one Iran, question I have to.
I'm finishing.
I have to
I'm finishing.
It a little bit.
The next Iran is unsanctioned Iran. So you are dissatisfied with both of them. What's your vision of other Iran? Third option. And when you are speaking about addressing Iran's regional policy, what do you concretely mean? Thank you very much.
May I start with Russia? I'm trying to write a book on jihadism these days, and there is a question which I'm dealing with all the time, which is concerning me the most. What Russia is doing now in Aleppo is a turbo booster for the jihadi scene everywhere. You know, because the only obviously and visibly helping people there are jihadis in eastern Aleppo. So I'm wondering how they want to deal with the situation in the Caucasus. With their own jihadis, and the answer I'm getting is dramatically bad. And this is they once dealt with that, and they carpet bombed Grozny. They are creating a problem they can't deal with. We cannot deal with that because we won't carpet bomb everybody. So it's at the end of the day maybe not about Syria, it's about us, and about the bigger game of the Russians which is played between Russia and the West, which is now approximately played in the Middle East.
Yeah, quickly, I'd say I don't think the Americans and the Russians were confronting each other much in Syria. I think if you looked at the relationship between Sergei Lavrov and John Kerry, you would see that it was a rather nice relationship between them. And I think Russia took advantage of what it thought was the old lady, the United States of America, during presidency of Barack Obama, and had a free hand in Syria. What would happen now? Many people are betting that Mr. Trump now will have a good deal with Mr. Putin. I think wait on a bit. Let's just find out what's going to happen. The United States is not only about one man in power. I'm an American. I live in the United States for 40 years and voted for many times. I've seen the changes take place. I think we should wait a bit and worry a lot. But that doesn't mean that we should preclude that we have to, sort of like a deal is done and Syria is finished and Bashar al-Assad is going to have all of Syria or part of Syria. I think it's very important to watch out what the language of interest is all about and what the language of make America great again is all about. We need to, and as far as what do we need to do to stop the bleeding, what we need to do is to find ways to stop the bleeding. I mean, it is a shame that the world looks at what's happening in Aleppo and really doesn't want to deal with it. I am sorry. This is an amazing tragedy. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. It calls upon our conscience. We in the West are, as an American, I'm speaking now, I come from Lebanon, but I tell you, we used to have the higher moral authority, if you will. We lost it by pretending that we don't see what's happening in Aleppo. We need to regain our conscience. And we also need to understand that fueling the Sunni-Shiite divide, which is the horror investment of many administrations before and probably many Europeans, I think this must be revisited seriously because it's going to cost dearly, not only in the Middle East, not only Shiites, not only Sunnis, but also Europeans and the Americans alike.
I think we do have time for 2 more questions. There's the lady, please.
Thank you. Mina Al-Arabi, Senior Fellow at the Institute of State Effectiveness. I just want to go back to the question of the debate, which is, will the nuclear deal make the Middle East more unstable in the long run? Raghida, I wanted to ask you to what extent you felt that the way the deal was negotiated and the breaking down of trust between many regional partners, especially the Gulf, and the US and Europe, while the negotiations were taking place in secret before we actually saw, is actually leading to the instability. And to add to it also, for both of you, possibly, the instability that will happen in the region because the deal is seen as rewarding bad behavior, that you can carry on bad behavior, but say this is siloed off, we're only talking about the nuclear deal, which allows it to carry on and to actually have the Secretary of State of the US defend the Iranian foreign minister and say he has nothing to do with Syria, this is not his file.
Yes.
Thanks, Bina. I think you really, thank you for reminding me, because that's a very important point. I think this was a problem for the GCC countries, because they were excluded. They said, let us be in on these negotiations, because it's also our future. And they were told, stay out, because this is only about the nuclear issue of Iran. And then they said, okay, well, let us please talk about the regional ambitions. And they said, be quiet, we only are supposed to speak only about nuclear Iran. And I remember I was talking to some Iranian officials in New York, and the first thing they said, we are not going to let them bring in the regional element. We're not going to, they were scared of that. Had the negotiations put their foot down, the Iranians would have had to do something about it. The trouble was that the negotiations from the 3+3 did not put their foot down on this one. And rewarding bad behavior, well, take a look at this. I mean, it's the silence itself, the muted reaction to what Iran is doing in Syria, not to mention Iraq, is rewarding Iran. The muted reaction by Western countries is already rewarding Iran.
The reward Iran is getting for bad behavior is nothing against the reward they're going to get after they have the bomb. So this is about the alternatives.
So I would say the last question, please, the gentleman here.
Thank you very much. Ali Waz from the International Crisis Group. Mrs. Dergham, if you explicate on some of your thoughts, I'm willing to vote for you, but I need a little bit more detail. Especially on your suggestion about the fact that this could lead to the nuclear proliferation cascade in the Middle East. Before the nuclear deal, we had an unrestrained Iranian nuclear program which was loosely monitored. That did not lead to a proliferation cascade. Now we have a highly restrained and highly monitored Iranian nuclear program, what leads you to believe that this will start a proliferation cascade? And by the way, if you argue the restraints will go away after 15 years, then the argument, another argument that you used, is the integrity of the NPT. If a country that is in compliance with its obligations under the NPT for 15 years is still to be treated as a second-hand citizen, as an exception to the rule, that would undermine the NPT. And final point, what leads you to believe that 7 countries that went through a grueling negotiations for 2.5 years just on one issue could actually also discuss everything else at the regional level with probably involvement of all the other countries, because I'm sure regional countries did not want the West to represent them. They also wanted to be at the table. And why wouldn't the result be any different than what we had with ISSG? Thank you.
Yes. Listen, I mean, the 6 countries discussing with Iran really let down their guards to way too easy. I mean, they had all the tools. They had the sanctions, and they had the way to bless a nuclear deal or not. The point is that they chose not to, and that was what was wrong with the negotiations themselves. The problem is, again, I definitely do not want any nuclear race in the region, but you have not bought, by this deal, an elimination of a potential of a nuclear race. You bought 10 years and gave money and lifted the sanctions and gave money, enabled the Revolutionary Guards of Iran to go ahead with their project in Syria and again in Iraq. I want to talk about Iraq. But the point is that this is going to create more tensions, as one of the questions pointed out, and that's going to take us back to square one. Again, that was intentional. I don't want to say intentional with the idea of fueling Shiite-Sunni divide, but if it was not thought about carefully, then I have to say, I'm sorry, the price is too big to pay.
Short answer?
Yeah, the answer is I will accept the result of the vote if I have won. Thank you very much.
What do you say? No, he's just waiting. He's just waiting for the vote. Now it's time for the closing statements. Okay. Normally 5 minutes. I think 3 minutes would be fine enough. Just do it.
Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I thought it was my closing remark, what I said before. Okay, you know, I just can't repeat it. Yeah, I totally agree with the fact that we have to start our plannings and our scenarios for that, what's going to happen in the next 10 years. It's quite difficult to do it in this moment when we have no idea what's going to happen in Washington, D.C. But this is one of the first things we have to do after the inauguration, to talk with the Americans how to go on with our relations to Iran and with the nuclear program and with the inspections. But the first precondition for such talks is that the next president, the president-elect, will not reject and cancel the whole deal, because he's going to cancel it. It means that there's going to be huge effects of that, what could happen in Iran for election. They're going to have elections in May, I think, or June. And this is not the right. This is the best boost you can give to the hardliners there. So we have to wait for that, what's coming from Washington, and then we have to focus on that, what's the next step could be, and this means to plan what we have to do for the next 10 years. But for the moment, there is no way to get a better deal, and this deal means that there are inspections, and without these inspections, the centrifuge would run, and nobody would inspect them and would know what's going on there, and would be the fast track of Iran to the bomb, would be the fastest track for Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and then Egypt to start the nuclear programs, the military nuclear programs too.
Thank you very much. Raghida, the last chance to convince.
Yes, look, let me remind us of what is the question that was put to this debate. It was not whether a nuclear deal should have been concluded or not. It is not, the question that is put to this debate is not about should this nuclear deal be scrapped or not. It is a very simple, and I ask you to kindly read it, what was the question? Whether the nuclear deal contributed to destabilizing the region or not. And that is what we are debating. And that is what I came prepared to talk about with you, hopefully to get your vote. I have a wonderful competitor here, and I would congratulate him wholeheartedly if he won the debate. But we need to absolutely really be clear on this question. The question is, did this nuclear deal empower Iran to do the better thing in its region, to behave in a better way towards its neighbors and towards the conflicts in the region? And the answer is clearly no. Iran has been emboldened and Iran has been enabled to go ahead and to get the money and get the blessing to go on its adventures that you absolutely criticize. I bet you this audience here is against what's happening in Aleppo. I bet you a lot of you feel very guilty about not doing more than you have. So the question is really, what have we looked at? We looked at what Iran's behavior is in the region. You know, creating paramilitary sectarian forces in Iraq, similar to the ones in Iran, is not the way for preserving the territorial integrity of Iraq. It is not. Going ahead with importing and exporting and making or manufacturing militias, I'm not talking about Hezbollah in Lebanon, I'm talking about other militias who are manufactured somewhere in Afghanistan and they've been taken to fight in Syria on the side of Bashar al-Assad. This is not something that you approve of either, I am sure of that. So the question is, I am definitely, the point is, not the question is, I am definitely criticizing the fact that the nuclear deal pushed aside the regional ambitions. That was wrong. I am not saying scratch the deal, so please, this is not what is on the table, that's not what we're being asked to discuss. It is whether Iran had been taken advantage of escaping scrutiny by the international community and being enabled and empowered to go ahead and execute its plans of exporting its revolution to Iraq or to Syria and intervening militarily in Arab lands. That is the question. I think, yes, Iran has been emboldened and enabled, and it's time for the West to say, we have to reverse that trend. Vote for me, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dergham. Thank you very much. I think the discussion was excellent. The organizing was a little bit difficult for me. Sorry for that. But now there is the second vote, please. And of course, I'm curious who will win this. Just remembering, the first is opening of the Pandora's box. The second is it will be more peaceful. Oh?
I did a good job.
I don't know who is the winner, but I see who was more convincing. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.